Hello everybody, this is Jordan here with TrueHumanity. Pretty excited to continue this video series and these talks, I guess, this information I'm trying to bring together and share with everybody. If you haven't watched the video previous to this, where we introduced the Younger Dryas event and other cosmic impacts and other information, and especially if you haven't seen our introduction launch video, I would consider going back and watching that first. So after I watched the previous video, I think I've been able to get a better picture about what, going forward, at least for the time being, what I want to do, and I think it'll help everybody in this process. So the last video, real quickly, was a 30-minute long video, roughly. And I think that's a perfect length of time for this information that I'm trying to put together and get out to as many people as possible. I mean, we only have so long of an attention span where our butts can be in a seat and our ears attentive and receptive to information. So I think keeping these videos for the time being at around 30 minutes is a good way to synthesize this information and put it out the way you saw kind of in the last video. So in that same aspect, you know, there's a lot of information to cover, and I think if you just watched that last video, you could get an idea of how much information and research and evidence is out there, and it's huge, it's enormous. So I believe, and I also teach on the collegiate level outside of this, and I believe it'd be the best way to do this is kind of make them into 30-minute information and teaching sessions, for lack of a better term. So I think it's important that I recap important information regularly, because it helps me, it helps sink in information on me, and I believe it could help anyone else who's willing to, you know, take the time to sit down and watch this and not be distracted by, you know, everything around us. You know, I'm not even going to bother listening at all. So I will repeat important information often, especially in the beginning. You know, I think it's important that we can understand this foundational information about our history. You know, that's, like I said in the last video, either has been withheld from us or misled or manipulated or whatever term you want to use along those lines. So I also want to clarify something that I know I said in the last video, and probably said it in the launch video too, that, you know, if you want to go out and do your own research and search and look at these places and go to these places and whatever it may be, I understand that everyone's busy, especially at the moment. So I don't expect everyone to pay $2,000 to go to Egypt for a week. I don't expect everyone to sit down every other night and watch a 3-hour podcast about information. That's one of the main reasons I'm doing this, is to try and synthesize information the best way I can, so that the greatest, broadest picture can be painted, and then if you'd like the real detailed information on your own, you can do so. So I don't expect everyone to go out and do their own research in terms of, well, you know, it took him hours and hours to compile this. Well, look at how much work is before me. I don't expect people to do that. I just say this so that, you know, we have tons of skeptics, tons of naysayers. I'm a skeptic at heart who will say, this guy's full of crap. So go do your own research. There's tons of evidence out there. I mean, there's just every discipline, everything. So that's what I mean when I say that. I don't expect every single person to drop what they're doing and go and do that. So I just wanted to put that out there. A little, you know, just a little word of doing your own thing. Don't just take establishment and organization and, well, you know, somebody in a high-level position of whatever told me this, so I'll just believe it. You know, I think we're smarter than that, and we realize nowadays with everything going on in the world that, hey, maybe we've been misled or lied to. Maybe we should, you know, do a little of our own work. So I wanted to clarify that at the beginning of this video. So these videos will probably be about 30 minutes each, give or take. I'll upload them as I've done, and you can follow along. I'm going to begin numbering these so that it's easier to follow along, because if you just, you know, plop down and, you know, go into one of these videos, X number into them, you're probably going to be lost. So it's important to start at the beginning. So that being said, I want to recap briefly the Younger Dryas information I talked about yesterday. I'm not going to go into every single thing I talked about, but give you the broad overview with the lines of evidence and the different disciplines of science that they're finding this evidence. So just to recap the 5 major things that I went over in the last video, I guess it would be video number 1, is here's a couple lines of in different disciplines of science where they found this information about a major cataclysm or catastrophe that had happened 12,800 to 11,007 to 600 years ago. And I say 11,007 to 600 years ago because there is a little margin for error, not only in the dating of these different disciplines, but then you also bring in Plato, the old philosopher. Took a lot of crap for a couple of his books, the Critias and the Timaeus. But if you look at the rest of his work, and I'm not going to get into a Plato talk, but if you look at the rest of his work, he was a very honest man who tried to teach people. And, you know, a lot of critics and establishments along the millennia have tried to discredit these works because, they're just myth, it's just something, you know, Plato's little story to tell. But if you look into them, it all matches up with the information I'm going into. So I say that to say that in Plato's works, within the Critias and the Timaeus, he talks about, through his ancestor Solon and so forth, who studied in Egypt, and like I said, I'm not going to get into this today, but he talks about the fall of Atlantis, or a nation of Atlantis. Remember, I'm not saying they flew around in planes and had ray guns and all that, but an ancient, higher technology civilization to what we've been led to believe possibly existed. And in these books, he talks about that when his ancestors were studying in ancient Egypt, they had told him that, listen, you know, the ancient city of Atlantis, where many of our predecessors, ancestors may have come from, or just in general talking about Atlantis, we're saying that it sunk 11,600 years ago. So at the time it was Plato, so you minus the time from Plato, about 2,000 years, and then it was like 600 years between his ancestor Solon and when he heard the story, and then it was, I guess, 9,000 years before that they told him that this is when Atlantis sunk. So if you add those times together, it equals about 11,600 years ago, which is near the end of the Younger Dryas period. So there's multiple lines, as I've discussed and will discuss, that are pointing to the same thing. So this isn't a talk about Plato or Atlantis. So I just wanted to bring that in as why I said those time frames in before, because there is a margin for error. We do see warming happening in that year span, those years 11,700 and 11,600. So like I said, it's a little more more research and work has to be done to determine and find more evidence to solidify those years. Unlike in the 12,800 year ago when this began, we have a little bit more stronger evidence to support that this is what happened. So to recap, I'm sorry that I had a little talk about there, this is why I have to structure my videos a little bit, is that some of the things we talked about in the last video for the Younger Dryas event, lines of evidence that have come forth are the Greenland and Antarctica ice core samples that were done over the last few decades, or I should say had been extracted and then were researched along the last few decades. Those are the ice core samples. The megafauna deaths we talked about, and how so many of these species, about as many as are alive today, that amount of species were made extinct during this period. And then the sea level rise, the 400-foot global sea level rise, and the evidence of the channeled scablands and all this catastrophe and cataclysm etched across the surface of our planet. So those were kind of the things I touched on in the last video, and I wanted to expand on that because that's not the end of the story for the evidence leading to something major happening at this time period. So other things that have been found are these things called impact proxies. So what is that? So there's a certain level, geologically speaking, that goes down to that time period about 12,800 years ago, and across North America and some of Europe, what they're finding in this Younger Dryas period boundary is impact proxies. So what is an impact proxy? Well, the overall broad view of what they are is these things are a result from high kinetic energy events or impacts striking the Earth, whatever they may be. But they're not from Earth, they're something outside of the Earth caused these here down on Earth. So what are these proxies that I talk about? So carbon microspherules, something that can only be seen under a microscope. nanodiamond, also only able to be seen under a microscope. Nuclear glass. So all of these proxies are found at this layer, this time period that we're talking about, when you go and you unearth it, or you archaeology, whatever they do, geology, to find this layer. And it's known as the black matte layer, commonly known as the black matte layer. What else do they find at this layer? So they find carbon soot. So what is that? So what does that mean? So carbon soot is a result of massive fire, massive burning, massive biomass, trees and everything, the ground on fire. And this is being found ubiquitously equally across these areas. They're searching for the black matte layer in the Younger Dryas boundary, whether it be North America or Europe, etc., is that they're finding that at the bottom of this layer is these impact proxies that I just mentioned, the carbon microspherules, nanodiamonds, nuclear glass, and as you look up onto that layer, you see carbon soot built up upon that. So what is that showing? The massive biomass burning, massive wildfires. If you want to put it into one succinct term, continent-wide wildfires. Continent-wide wildfires. So below this layer, the black matte layer, about 12,800 years ago, we find the remains of extinct megafauna and humans of the culture of the Clovis culture. Now, I'm not going to get into the Clovis talk now, but it's becoming more mainstream, I guess, if you want to call it, universally accepted that obviously the Clovis people were not the first people here on the Americas. But the point of it is that below this black matte layer, we find the evidence of all these megafauna that went extinct and humans living there in this area that we're finding it before these events happen. Above that layer, geologically speaking, we don't find any remains. So it's only extant megafauna and humans, those who are still alive today. So below that layer, megafauna, animals that have been extinct, and humans, the Clovis culture, gone. Above that layer, modern remains, whether that be animals or people. So just to really quickly recap this, because these are additional lines of evidence from different disciplines of science. So we talked about, what I talked about in the last video, and then we have these impact proxies. So as something large, possibly a comet or asteroid, impacts the surface of the planet, massive energy is released, something we can't imagine today, is released when that body impacts the surface of the Earth. A movable force hits an immovable object, some reaction has to happen. And these are all the evidence of some type of impact happening. And you got to remember, these comets aren't, fluttering in and nice gliding down to the Earth, to land on a bed of pillows. These suckers are going at 30, 40, 50,000 miles per hour, slamming into the Earth. I think Randall Carlson said something along the lines of, if you physically just throw a bullet at somebody, right, and it hits their skin, maybe even the fastest pitcher throwing a bullet, right, it's going to probably irritate or, abrase your skin a little. But if you put a bullet into a gun, a mechanical device, and you accelerate that bullet into somebody, it's going to cause major bodily trauma. Same concept with a comet and the impact into the Earth. Same exact result. So remember, below this black matte layer, we have these extinct mammals being found, megafauna, and the Clovis culture, and above that, nothing, none of them. So briefly, with this Younger Dryas period, about 12,800 to 11,700, 600 years ago, what we saw is at the beginning of that 12,800 year ago start of the event, we see a massive rise in temperature and sea level on the planet. So as that impactor is coming in and hitting the Earth, it's releasing a lot of energy and all kinds of things we've talked about, raising the temperature of the Earth. But not long after that, we see the Earth plunge into cold, kind of back into the Ice Age for 1,200 years. And because of the things that it releases, whether from the impact or of itself and disintegrating, whatever it may be, it shrouds the Earth and covers it so that the normal greenhouse processes of cooling and warming our planet really aren't able to regularly take place. At the end of this Younger Dryas period, because remember, it went massive spike of heat, cold for X number of hundreds of years, 1200, 1100 years, and then all of a sudden we see another massive heating spike, multiple degrees, many degrees, like 10 degrees, probably more. I believe it rose the general temperature, climate of the Earth by almost 15 degrees Celsius. So we see this massive warming at the end of this Younger Dryas period, and a spike in temperature, which brings us completely out of the Ice Age. Like I said on the previous video, it jolts us back out of the Ice Age, and we're in the interglacial period, as it's known, the warming that we're in now. So I believe that the science is quite convincing for a comet impact at the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, the 12,800 years ago. But I think a lot more work, well, more work needs to continue to go on with this, but I think a lot more work has to be done on the ending of the Younger Dryas period. You know, what caused us to get out of it? Because I don't think a comet or planetary-like body impacting us can answer all of the questions we may have or all of the evidence anomalies we're seeing. And I don't have the final answer, so I don't want to come at it like that. But I believe there's what I believe in. Dr. Robert Schoch out of Boston University, also the one who uncovered the real age of the Sphinx, and I mentioned that in the intro, the launch video. Dr. Robert Schoch believes it was solar-induced, some kind of either coronal mass ejection, huge solar flare, or some other cosmic energy source that had struck the planet. In what manner it did or how widespread it was is up for debate still, and there's obviously more research that needs to be done. But I believe it was not an impact of a comet. And some people will say, well, what about a water impact? You know, a water impact would throw up these water vapors, etc., into the atmosphere and would create a greenhouse effect to warm it. And I say that that's true, but also if we look at the other event, the Burkle crater incident of about 5,000 years ago, it was an impact into the ocean. And we don't see the dramatic rise of temperatures as we see at the end of the Younger Dryas. And there's other evidence, it's not just that temperature, there's other things that I have to talk about that support that hypothesis, if you want to call it that, educated guess, because it's not a theory. So I'm not going to go into that today, but I believe that the ending of the Younger Dryas, which brought us out of that 1200-year hell period, was some type of solar event. So the mechanism by which it came, at this point, right this second, doesn't matter. All the factors I'm thinking, it wasn't an impact into the ocean by a comet-like body, but rather a solar type of event, some type of energy source onto this planet. And we see many different types of anomalous evidence on these old stone structures, whether it be Baalbek in Lebanon or Egypt or the like. We see melting of hard granite stone, melting, complete just anomalous things that just, you can't, a blowtorch held onto the stone would not cause the type of damage we're seeing there. And I'll go into that further in future videos. But I wanted to continue to paint this picture and this summary of the Younger Dryas event to show you how catastrophic it really was. And why, when people ask the question, well, where's the evidence? Where is this lost civilization or these whatever kind of defense they throw up? Well, when you look at the evidence of how catastrophic this was, what would be left? Stone structures and some humans, obviously, hopefully. That's all that's going to be left. You know, metal and all this other things that degrade through time or were destroyed by these events, that caused this disaster. What are we going to find? Skyscrapers still standing? That's silly. And I'm not saying they had skyscrapers. It's just a parallel I'm drawing. So you can start to see many lines of evidence start building upon each other and start painting a picture that if you are absorbing this material, you should begin to ask the question to yourself, what's going on? What have we been taught? What's the whole story? You got to re-examine everything going on now, because if these kinds of events happen, first of all, they were devastating. Second of all, the time period between these events and now has to be re-examined. And third of all, why is things the way they are today? How did it get this way? So these are all part of what I'm going to be discussing and continuing to discuss and sharing with people. I'm hoping everyone finds value in this. I do want to give a shameless plug. There is a research group called the Comet Research Group, I guess it's called, the Comet Research Group. So it's a group of about 50, 60 more well-credentialed academic scientists in different disciplines who are doing this research. So I'm not just pulling this research out of the air from a podcast or whatever. These are the evidence that they have come with, and we're just putting it all together. So I'm not just making this up and thinking, well, this would be a great story to tell, and maybe let's put this together. These are evidence that many credentialed scientists in different disciplines are coming together. And it just so happens that, unfortunately, most people don't have access to these academic journals. So it's up to somebody to tell people about these things. And I guess that's maybe one of my duties now, is to try and get this information out. Like I said, no one should expect you to go and spend thousands of dollars to visit these sites or to do hours and hours and hours of research on your own. Part of the reason I'm doing this is so I can synthesize this material, present it, and if people want to do further research and etc., they can do so themselves. But it shouldn't be expected of you that, oh, go out and do it yourself, I'm not going to tell you anything else, because that's silly. And that's part of the reason why we're in the situation we are today, of people withholding information or the plethora of what I've discussed previously, manipulation going on. So this is another good complement summary to the previous video about the younger Dryas incident. Like I said, this is still broad overview of what's going on. More things I'll be talking about and how it relates to these ancient civilizations and cultures, how it all ties together. So the next video I do, I'm probably going to talk more about these younger Dryas, the younger Dryas event, more of these more evidence that has come forward, more research being done, so we can start to put it all together and paint this picture of what are we looking at here. Something is not right to what we've been taught in academic institutions, or what religion has told us, or what we believe as a whole, or so on. And I think moving forward it's going to be easier and better for everybody if I keep the videos down to about 30 minutes, maybe a little less, so that like I said, and I've been saying, it's hard for people to sit down and watch a 2.5, 3, 4 hour podcast, especially regularly. So I want to use this as a point, as a vehicle to synthesize information, present it in a picture, and continue to talk about it and expand upon it. But if people would like to do their own research, they by all means are able and allowed to. So here's just a couple more things I talked about today of the evidence, the lines of evidence from different disciplines pointing to a major event 12,800 years ago, which was the beginning of the Younger Dryas boundary and the Younger Dryas period. So I understand I'm repeating things, and it's purposeful. It's not because I'm forgetting myself, but it's important information that we need to get ingrained, I guess, if you want to say, into our heads, into our beings, because this is foundational information that once you can begin to understand not only the catastrophes, but also the evidence of these anomalous architectural monuments and landmarks, and how, if we look at it through what Egyptology and those have taught us, it doesn't make sense. But when you put it into this broader picture and this story of what we're trying to show through the scientific evidence, you could begin to see, it all makes sense now in this light, in this paradigm shift, because you can see there was people. There was anatomically upright standing humans with the same brain size as you and me today existing prior to 12,800 years ago. And we now know through the dating of the Sphinx and other anomalous locations like the pyramids and Baalbek, and I'm not going to go on, but that they had high technology, they had astronomical skills, geography skills, they had all scientific skills, mathematics, etc., that they were able to construct these landmarks, these buildings, these architectural masterpieces, and they serve more than one purpose of you going to them and looking and going, wow, that's pretty magnificent. Okay, let me go back to the rest of my day. Because when you dig deeper and you look at the other things that these landmarks have either encoded in their geometry or their astronomical importance, significance, whatever, you see that they serve many purposes, and most of these purposes relate back to this incident of 12,800 years ago. Because what I'm going to try and show is that this incident was so catastrophic for humanity that they had to, no matter what, if it was the only thing they did going forward, they had to put encode all of this information into everything in humanity so that no one could be mistaken about what happened, whether that's myths and legends and stories and history and architecture and anomalous sites like I'm talking about, whatever it is. They're all pointing to this period. They're all pointing to this event going, look, whoever's reading this, for lack of better terms, do something about it, okay? Because this is what happened to us, and look, okay, we're trying to show you this was very, very important. And now, there's a happy, the story, and they lived happily ever after. We're at that point now. We could do something about this. We can protect our planet. And the point of all this, the last 2 videos and this video, and future videos, is to show you, listen, here's what happened, here's all the information and research and evidence, and here's our situation now, and how can we incorporate all of this stuff we're learning and will learn into the now so that the future is better. And I think that's the point of me doing this whole True Humanity project. So, like I said, going forward, I'm going to try and keep these videos to 30 minutes. I know I keep saying this, but I'm only scratching the surface. And when you add in all these different things that I'll be talking about, you can see the connection and the marriage between this all. And that, we've been so ingrained to believe that science is the end. That's the end of everything. That's the definitive source for all knowledge, everything. And it's not. It's not wrong, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And we have to look back in history and through these texts and through these architecture and through everything and see that the ancient civilizations, or survivors, if you want to call it, of this cataclysm, purposefully did these things so that we today, or somewhere along the line, down the line, can see this, whoa, we need to do something about it. So we are intimately connected with the cosmos, this planet, and ourselves, as I say. So next video, what I'm going to probably do is record a couple 30-minute videos in succession and release them, within an equal time frame. Because, of course, I'd like to go out and do things in my own life. So, I don't want to put a definitive answer on that. But what I'll end up doing is probably recording a couple more 30-minute videos and releasing them successively after this. So, we've talked more about the younger Dryas, these impact events, the catastrophe, everything across the landscape, and how science and the different disciplines of science are now coming together to paint this unified picture, if you want to call it. And there's a lot more to get into, and I'm not going to do so today. But I want to end like I've ended my other videos, in that there's no reason to be filled with doom and gloom and despair and depression and sadness, because unlike 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago or more, in 2019, us as a human species can do something about this threat that looms over us 24/7, 365. And there's hope. And if we could just stop this nonsense and this killing and all the other things I've talked about in the human condition, if we could stop that and create a grand human project, not only will that protect our Earth and our families and our future, but could be something that could bring us all together as one species, as a grand project to do something, protect our Earth. Realize that what we've created, this division, these nations, if you want to call it today, didn't exist back then, because we find evidence similarly across the globe that they were living more unified. Maybe not in perfect harmony, we don't know, but you can see these different anomalies and these different lines of evidence that show, there was a global society, there was civilization somehow connected to each other. And of course, I'm going to go into more and more evidence and things that I've researched about that. But all that to say is there is hope. There's no need to be scared or sad or afraid, because we can do something about it. And I'd like to end this video in saying that we each can go out and do something about it. Changing our behavior, how we interact with people, how we treat the Earth and each other. All of these things can only help, us as a species grow closer and become more unified, and, if you want to use the term, harmonious. I do like that term. And I'll discuss more about the unifying principles and all that moving forward. But as we start to see, we have to lay a foundation somewhere. And the foundation can be most strongly laid in the fact that this event of the Younger Dryas period was a definitive moment in the story of the human species, at least for the last 5 million years, if not longer. And until we understand the magnitude and, the overview of this event, it's going to be hard to put all the picture together and realize what we're doing today and moving forward. So I hope that you're able to find value in this. If you do so, I'd like you, if you want to subscribe to this channel, like the video, share, that would be greatly appreciated by me. More videos are coming out. I should be recording some today, maybe tomorrow. I don't know exactly when, but I'm going to try and keep them down to 30 minutes or so. So I appreciate all of this and you being able to take the time just to watch this, because it's fascinating stuff, and there's a part of me that's sad that it's been withheld or not known for so long, but on the other hand, an excited part of me that, hey, we now know this. You know, we're at a time right now where we can understand these events, understand our species, understand the world today, incorporate that, and move forward positively. So I appreciate you guys taking the time, and I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video. All right, see you later. Bye.